Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and this video is addressing joining various organizations and brotherhoods by Manly P. Hall, an article taken from the All-Seeing Eye, Volume 4, Number 2, June 1927. Questions and Answers, a department maintained for the convenience of the reader. Question: do you advocate people who think along progressive lines joining various organizations and brotherhoods, promulgating certain religious, philosophical, and ethical codes? If so, would you kindly give the names of such sects and groups as you could recommend? MMS. Answer: this question must be considered from several angles. In the first place, it has often been said that in organization there is strength. But is it not also true that this strength is of the organization and not of the individual? Groups of people, either in communities or in organizations, depending upon each other for mutual support and mutual enlightenment, all too often lose both their individuality and their independence. Thus, while the strength of the entire is continually increasing by new recruits, it is a question just what effect is produced upon the recruit. In the second place, motive is the deciding factor in many of these problems. Why does an individual join an organization? Is his purpose to lean upon or to be leaned upon? If he is weak, he will lean upon any strong personality with whom he comes in contact, and if he is strong, it will not be long before the greater part of the organization will be leaning upon him, and he will be denounced by that vast number of learners who will immediately become envious of his intelligence if he possesses any. Most people who join religious and philosophical organizations do so for what they can get and not for what they can give. And a large group composed of individuals with axes to grind has very little to offer to an active, independent intellect. In the third place, organization has a consistent habit of being inconsistent, and inconsistent in their doctrines and tenets. Today you may be able to vouch for everything they do. Tomorrow, their policies may be widely at variance with your ideals. Most organizations, moreover, do not contain more than one real mind. The mind is reflected in the membership. When this individual mind changes its opinions, the membership, chameleon-like, changes its mental and spiritual shades to match the background. Those who will not change, branching out, form a new society until what was once a single train of thought becomes a seven-headed hydra with all the heads biting at each other. In the fourth place, organizations are segregative and separative. If you join an organization, the world considers you as championing the doctrines and codes promulgated by that group with which you have associated yourself. The saddest part of this feature is that the world also considers you as being opposed to and irreconcilable against those organizations and individuals whose ideals are at variance with the cult that you have accepted. In other words, the world says that if you are for one thing, you must be against all else. Or if actual animosity does not exist, there must be at least a dangerous indifference. In the fifth place, it is a well-known fact that crystallization is a keystone of the physical world, and visualization the keystone of the spiritual world. Organizations seemingly cannot exist without crystallization, and crystallization gradually produces in spiritual movements the same condition that it produces in the physical body: age, disease, suffering, and death. Death is the separation of conscious life from a vehicle no longer capable of giving its expression. All spiritual truths die when their vehicles become crystallized, and no organization has yet been formed which has been able to escape the inevitable dissolution resulting from crystallization. If the organization could die without involving the individuals who encompass it, things would not be so bad. When the mind has followed and accepted dogma and creed for a certain length of time, it becomes incapable of individual estimation and the decay of the organization by destroying the crutch upon which those lean who have lost the power to stand alone, leaves its component parts hopeless, helpless, and useless. In the sixth place, the modern world lacks the solidarity of antiquity. We are a generation of superficial thinkers, and therefore the products of our thought are superficial and impermanent. The organizations and institutions of antiquity stood for centuries, because their founders and members represented the highest types of intellect. The ranks of the ancient educational and spiritual orders were not composed of easy believers. Each member dared to think his own thoughts, live his own life, and doubt anything that did not seem reasonable to his senses. Ancient religion was not a process of acceptation. Every theory advanced was discussed and accepted or rejected upon the basis of its intrinsic merit. If modern organizations were of a standard conformable to those of the ancients, they would be of vastly greater value. Although, being organizations, they must meet the inevitable fate of organizations: crystallization. Modern cults are all too often the brainstorms of honest but mentally incompetent persons who, fired with aspiration but lacking logic, reason, and philosophical education, are not properly qualified to finish the task they have begun. In the seventh place, we are unfortunately living in an age of commercialization, which as surely has permeated our philosophical world as it has our material sphere. A great number of cults and creeds have been foisted upon the public not by philosophers and mystics, but by financiers. Many of these have been eminently successful, as the disillusioned members will testify after the bubble has burst. In this respect, it may be truthfully said that the devil has quoted the scripture with profit. Indeed, it has become quite a problem now to decide, when joining an organization, whether it will lead you to heaven or to the poor farm. In the eighth place, spiritual and philosophical societies are the breeding grounds for the most dangerous forms of hero worship extant. It is positively amazing to note how quickly half a dozen foolish people can make a demigod out of a seventh poor sinner. It is our firm belief that no person who ever worshipped a man understood him, but nearly all groups of people seem concerned with the perpetual deification of some poor, hard-working, long-suffering human being who may have died of starvation, whose words are quoted as scripture, and whose accomplishments form the axis of the organization. Having considered the arguments against affiliating with religious and philosophic organizations, it is only fair to present the other side of the proposition. There are two outstanding reasons why affiliation with the right kind of a group may attain a definite and constructive end. 1. In an age which organizes and incorporates all forms of activity, it is almost impossible for religion, philosophy, and ethics to survive unless they combat material organization with spiritual organization. Single individuals are overwhelmed by the mass movement of a materially organized civilization, unless those interested in maintaining the high standards of culture absolutely indispensable to the survival of the race pull their strength. Modern commercialism may totally obliterate creative idealism. Second, man's mind is tremendously influenced by what takes place about him. A child will study more faithfully at school than at home, because in the schoolroom there are numbers of other children doing the same thing. There is also a certain amount of vanity involved. No individual likes to exhibit less capacity and intelligence than the person next to him. Thus, organization offers a twofold motive for greater accomplishment: the stimulus of environment and the stimulus of personal vanity. There are several organizations of a philosophic, religious, and fraternal nature in America and other parts of the world that are actually accomplishing a great amount of good. Our position does not permit us to actually name them, nor would we consciously assume the personal responsibility of deflecting the mind of another person into any prescribed channel of thought and activity. Therefore, we can only suggest that in matters pertaining to organization, an acid test be applied. We will suppose that you feel an inward urge to associate yourself with some group interested in philosophic or religious studies. You should investigate the matter very carefully, realizing that in all probability, many of your future actions will be influenced by the code promulgated by that particular cult. Do not be in haste to join new movements that have not had an opportunity for time to pass upon their merits. Time is the heartless critic, constantly denouncing and exposing weakness, falseness, and inconsistency. On the other hand, do not condemn that which is new, but, restraining both enthusiasm and criticism, judge all things by their works. There are good organizations, bad organizations, and indifferent organizations. Good organizations are in every case progressive, altruistic, educational, non-commercial, and impersonal. They seek to build individual characters, teaching men how to think rather than what to think. Bad organizations are usually non-progressive, pernicious, bigoted, commercial, and personal. They are usually built up about some individual who believes that he can increase his own power and position by having an organization back of him. In many cases, such individuals depend on superstition for the attainment of their ends. They have long and curious names, weird and hair-raising mysteries. They conceal themselves behind a barrage of meaningless bombast, so that those entering the cult cannot get close enough to find out how little the great man knows. Indifferent organizations are those which, being neither hot nor cold, meet the sad fate prescribed for such. The Lord speweth them out of his mouth. If you desire to join an organization for spiritual, philosophic, or ethical betterment, feeling that you have not yet reached the place where you are qualified to decide for yourself that which is best for your immortal soul, we suggest that you search out an organization as loosely organized as possible. For many a noble enterprise has been hobbled by its own red tape. Go to a group that makes no profession that it is wiser or greater than others, but in modesty and simplicity is diligently striving to work out its own salvation. Shun as you would the plague deep and profound secrets, unutterable mysteries, and $10 admission fees. Beware of mechanical cults which grind out initiates in strings like sausages. If possible, find a group that is in some way connected with the ancient systems of philosophy and thought. Eschew exclusiveness and permit yourself to be involved in nothing that isn't big enough to recognize the good in all men, the wisdom in all religions, and the truth belongs to no man. Beware, most of all, of any group or cult which is the self-appointed and sole custody of truth. For all groups are individuals who believe that they are the only ones to whom God has communicated his divine knowledge, brand themselves false prophets. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.